Welcome, everybody, back to Church and World History. This is our class tonight. We have a great class here in Baltimore with us. Yeah, just say yay, clap your hands, yay. And we're thankful. We're so thankful for all of you who have purchased this DVD, or maybe it's a pirated copy, but all things are before the Lord, and we hope you're blessed by the content, even if you came by it by illegal means. But that's okay. That's all right. That's between you and God. And I'm Pastor Steve Androlonis, one of the pastors, teachers here at Maryland Bible College and Seminary, and come and see us sometime. Okay? All right. And it's an experience. It really is. And those who are in this room can tell you, being here live is like an experience. Okay. All right. Thank you. All right. Lord, thank you for this class. Bless it to our minds and hearts in your name. Amen. Okay, now that we've gotten all that out of the way. So we're talking about the Roman Empire, and it is there it is at its height. We see it, we come back to this. It is mentioned in the, let's look at Daniel 2. We'll read this for our edification. We'll start there. Daniel, the king, Nebuchadnezzar, had the dream, and Daniel defined the dream for him, getting the message from God about what the dream was about. And in that dream, there was an image that had 2 iron legs, and then also 10 toes, some of which were iron and some of which were clay, or ceramic material, which is clay just put in a kiln. But that's in verse 40 of Daniel chapter 2, it says, "The 4th kingdom shall be strong as iron, for as much as iron breaks in pieces and subdues all things, and as iron that breaks all these shall it break in pieces and bruise. Whereas you saw the feet and the toes, part of potter's clay, part of iron, the kingdom shall be divided. But there shall be in it the strength of the iron, for as thou sawest the iron mixed with the miry clay. And as the toes of the feet were part of iron and part of clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly broken. And whereas," this is verse 43, Daniel 2, "whereas you saw iron mixed with miry clay, they shall mingle themselves with the seed of men, but they shall not cleave one to another, even as iron is not mixed with clay." Okay, we saw the statue that I had a picture of, but I'll just draw one for you. And just trust me, there's 10 toes there. On each foot, yeah. Bigger than big, larger than large, bigger than big. He's as big as a barge. Wow. That used to be a cartoon, Gigantor, and that looks like him. Gigantor, kind of like a flying robot from Japan, something like that. They all talked funny, The mouths moved really fast, and anyway. But this are the legs of iron, toes of clay and iron. But what will happen to the Roman Empire is it is going to split very soon. We're in the end of the massive persecution that's going on under the Emperor Diocletian. He's purposing to stamp out Christianity. And really the word atheism, I know it's kind of hard to believe, but the word atheist or atheism comes from a Greek word that was applied to Christians, because the Christians would not worship the emperor. They would not offer the incense to the pagan gods that were the practice of the state. And Diocletian, his one purpose was to eradicate Christianity in 305, 306 BC. AD. 305, 306 AD, after Christ. And so this word was first, it's kind of interesting, this word was first applied to Christians, that they were not worshipers. They were not worshipers of gods, not of the gods they were there. So the 2 iron legs will find that that's what's going to happen first. The Roman Empire is going to fragment into 2 distinct parts about this time. Diocletian feels like the empire is too big. It's too big for him to manage as one man, as one emperor. So his grand idea is to divide it, and that way he will turn over part of his rule to a man named Maximinian, and he will control the east. Diocletian will stay in the east part of the empire, and Maximinian will stay in the west part of the empire. Now, the west part of the empire is we're going to see here in a second, just a division here. We'll see this, how this happens. Now, this is right here, pretty much along the border of Greece and these other countries. This is now this would now be what is this? Right along here, this should be Croatia. Yeah, Croatia, Serbia in this area, Macedonia is up in this area. But now this is his design, is that if I can just split the empire in two legs, I'll let Maximian have that part, the part that's in decay, and I'll take the part where there's still life. There's still things going on. You have all these tribes and everything that are in this area that are still trading here, and the trade from the Orient comes right through here, through the Bosphorus, right here in what's now Istanbul. Istanbul is right in this little territory here between the Black Sea, and that goes down into the Aegean Sea. This was a calculated kind of maneuver, because the empire is starting to fall apart. They can't control it. They're raising taxes. He's a radical. This is what you had here was a general, an administrative type of general in the army, and they are going to figure out a way to keep the funding, because right here along the Rhine and the Danube rivers you have the Goths and the Germanic tribes, and over here you have this group that we'll talk about. The Hungarians will love tonight's class. Are they here? Just you. We don't have more Hungarians in here? Oh, okay. All right. So we're going to talk about the most famous Hungarian, Attila the Hun, tonight, right? I mean, he's, this is his time, and he had his reign, and it was a reign of terror, right? but they are coming from this territory. They are really classified as barbarian, savage kind of tribes. They're coming out of the woods. Really, they're coming out of the woods. They have not been exposed to Greek culture at all. If you ask them what a tragedy is, it probably meant that, they didn't find something to eat during that day. Tragedy and comedy, that's just, they were coming into this area here, and they were, and over here, there was the Persian Empire was resurrecting itself. And so there was sort of a squeeze on from the east and from the north, and even as far north as Britannia, there was trouble going on there. The Anglos and the Saxons were coming in here. Viking visitations were happening too from these northern lands up here. And they were introducing their own kind of, warfare. And the Roman army was now made up of it was a diverse army. It was a diverse army. In the early days, the elite groups all came from the same sort of families and the same sort of culture background. But as they dominated these areas, the people who wanted to be around the power center, they would go back to Rome, they would go back to Sicily, back to the Mediterranean, the Blue Sea, back to the Costa del Sol along here, and to retire. And so they would begin to infiltrate the army and stock the army with conquered peoples. Like, we'd conquer this territory and we'd add a few of them, the few of the best and the brightest, the strongest. They'd add them to the army, but they'd have to heavily tax these parts of the business area. So this business cultural area was heavily taxed, while the soldiers were protecting them from the tribes that were wanting to come down here and find this land. What they were coming from, they're coming from a colder climate. They're coming from a climate that's a lot more difficult to farm. And they see what is in Rome. They see what is in the south of France. And they haven't gotten here yet. They haven't seen. It's hard to believe. What is here right now? What is here in this area right now? The Sahara Desert. A big beach. The Sahara Desert. Yeah, rather the largest beach on the planet. That's right. The Sahara Desert is right there. But this territory along this thing was the breadbasket of the Roman Empire. They counted on this area for a lot of grain, particularly from the Nile Delta here, and then up into this area. It's kind of interesting that now it's just dry, and desert there right now. Not much agriculture there at all. And now we know, like, the south of France is just full of grapevines and everything, and all kinds of olive trees and sunflower seeds are as far as the eye can see in the south of Spain, that kind of place. But this place is now all desert, really pretty much across the top of this. And it's, it's kind of interesting. It's a cultural kind of thing. When people from the tribes of Israel began to resettle Palestine after they had been driven out many years later in the 17 and 1800s, it actually started before the Nazis' declaration of war on the Jewish people. Actually, there were in those territories pogroms, which are attacks, local attacks, and many Jews walked across Europe to get back down here. They were scattered throughout these places, and many, especially in this area, after they had been driven up into these areas or carried there by Alexander the Great or others, they began to walk back to Israel. And when they got there, when they got enough group, they found that the land was pretty much undefended and uncultivated. And it didn't take long for them to carve out a niche for themselves in the early 1900s to drive out the Arab population that was there, the Philistine population, really, if you want to know what it is. It's the old Philistines that are there. And they drove this, they did that, and they began to water, and the desert bloomed. Yes, Kermit?
What happens when the land that was fertile is salted?
Well, yeah, that's part of it, true. Yeah, the Romans did salt Carthage, which was right here. Yeah, it goes into the soil and it kills everything. All the nutrients are gone from it. You're right. That was a Roman practice. Like when they conquered a city, they would salt it, so nothing could grow there. No one would want to be there. They'd salt the territory. So yeah, that's one of those things. This wasn't salted, and Israel developed a way of either the first Jews that made their way back to this promised land. They made the desert bloom by working the land and establishing a way of irrigation by using the Jordan River, using the Dead Sea, using the Mediterranean Sea. And none of this had taken place while the Philistines had been occupying that area. So it's kind of an interesting kind of thing to understand that these areas probably could be restored in some way. But we know the governments there are all, they are all Islamic governments at this point in time. And so whether that's in the culture, I don't know. I'm not sure if that farming idea is in that culture. I'm not sure. But the tribes that were coming down here saw what was going on in this territory, and they were in their hearts coveting that fertile land, and they were going to take it. So you had civil wars break out in both parts. That's the amazing thing. They split it, and then it was almost on the verge of a total split again. Now in 306, Diocletian went into retirement, and Constantine. Now he's a really important person in the history of the church. Constantine became the emperor of the whole empire. He was going to keep the empire together. But to do that, what he did to do that was he moved. Let's open this up a little bit. This is sort of thing that sort of tells you how the empire rose and fell here. Actually, it's a quiz. I should fill in the things there for you. But, the Romans rose and fell. The Roman Empire rose and fell. We're right here at this point, the early 300s. Barbarian tribes are coming in, and this is Constantine. This is a sculpture of Constantine. And the important thing that he did was he declared Christianity a legal religion. He declared Christianity a legal religion. Okay, you can cheer. But remember, the outer pressure kept the spiritual fire. Now that the outer pressure is gone, things will go dull very quickly. It's really interesting just how fast the church that was persecuted became persecutors. It's very interesting how fast. By 380, the command of the church that instead of local churches, there had become a centralized kind of thing in Rome. And by 380, there was the first murder of a church by Christians of other Christians because they were declared to be heretics. Murder, execution it actually was. They declared them to be witchcraft, and we know in our own country we've had that happen. Apparently there's a party going on next door. A little loud here, but we're okay. But Constantine took the throne of Rome in 306, and in 313 he was in particular facing a difficult fight, and in the sky he saw a cross with the Latin words that said, "In this sign, conquer." And he took that to mean that the Christian faith was the faith that he should fight in. And he saw this as an opportunity. We'll have to wait to see if Constantine was a true believer. Was this a conversion of convenience? He actually saw something in the sky. He decided he won a decisive battle. He did bring the Roman Empire sort of back together. This is the walls that he was built in Constantinople, which is now Istanbul. He fortified the cities. These are the ruins of those walls that are there. You can see just what he did. He set up a new city in that territory, in that area, in the center of the realm. So we go back to that picture. We see where the realm is. He set up right there is where he set up his idea. He figured he could get to the front of the Danube and he could get to the front of the Euphrates, which were the Persians and then the Germanic tribes that were attacking his flanks. So he figured this was the best place for him to live, so he built a nice fortress there in this area and to protect himself. And this lasted, until the Ottoman Empire. This part of the empire will not die. The western part of the empire is going to die in 476. The western part of the Roman Empire will die in 476 AD. What's called the Byzantium part of the empire will last for another 1,000 years, almost to the year 1400 before it's finally overrun by the Turks and the Ottoman Empire. But they get, what's the difference there? The difference there is, just the place of influence. It was a more strategic area. The people were more inclined to work the land and to participate in the business and the work, whereas in the West they had got really fat, dumb, and happy. Really, that's, I pay my taxes, you protect me, that's fine. I'm fat, as long as I, go, you reread some of those inscriptions, they didn't really believe in what was going on in the afterlife. Okay? So, Constantine died, of course, as all men do. It's appointed once to men to die. A couple things he did. He made great use of Germanic soldiers, and also allowed them to settle. German tribesmen were allowed to settle within the territories, okay? All right, not just within but within the other territories, within Gaul, which is now France, within Spain, within Italy, and in other places. The German people, German immigration. It was permitted, and it changed the dynamic of the population. It changed the dynamic of the population. I mean, they were hardworking people. They were used to, their character was hardworking, disciplined, administrative people, and so they became the top performers in the new arrangement that was going on. After Constantine died, we'll talk about this the next part of the class, but in 325, Constantine called a council, the Nicene Council, and in a little town, and it brought all the church people together, really. He tried to organize. It was him who decided that the church should be a part of the state, and he thought that he could keep the state together, the empire together, by promoting Christianity, that Christianity would be really a vehicle that he could use to drive into the future. And, so he became a Christian. He set up, he established places of worship in the center of Rome. He had the priests, there was a priestly class that was developed, and these became the leaders over all of the churches, and Christianity enjoyed peace. It was a legitimate religion, and the pagans didn't like it so much because, of course, now those sacrifices weren't offered at the pagan temples anymore, and there was a backlash for a season against the Christians a little bit, but the persecutions were not orchestrated from the government anymore. So these were just small conflicts that happened, and actually Christians started to persecute themselves a little bit, like stealing not stealing, but taking things from pagans who were no longer the accepted group of people in the Roman area there, in and around Rome. So Constantine left the empire in the hands of his three sons, and there was still trouble going on. The trouble continued, and it required another emperor, and this is Valentinian the First. I know his name spells Valentine, but it's not really a guy who would send cards with hearts to anybody. Valentinian the First. Well, I'll show you what. Look at this is the face that only a mother can love. Look at that. Look at that. That's your emperor. This is like, I am not fooling around. This is like your no-nonsense, law and order emperor. I'm going to get this area back in order. And, he was a wrestler. He was a wrestler from the region that's now Serbia, Croatia. He was there. And so he wasn't really from that group of people that was down along the coast. He was, from the interior. And he took the throne. Trouble was going on. And he had a real sense of duty to the state and to the poor. And there were a lot of poor, bread and circuses, that kind of thing was his, but he kept, and he increased the army, increased their pay, which was usually the way, because if you were emperor, there wasn't really a defined way of getting to be emperor. Like you would name your son, or your wife would name one of her sons, or a favorite nephew, that kind of thing. It's all kind of confusing how an emperor became the emperor. And he's the most powerful person on the planet at that time. No democracy, no election. They had the Senate, which was a body of, august thinking people making laws, supposedly. But really, the emperor comes in and he just rules the roost. That's the way it was. And this kind of guy came in there. Look at that earlobe on that guy. Wow. Or is that his hair? That could be his hair. Actually, that could be his hair and his helmet. Sorry. But this is the guy that's coming after you. Oh, I put this. This is the kind of coin. Yeah, I don't know if you can see this. Let's get it as big as possible, maybe. But this one right here, this is Valentinian dragging somebody by his hair. So that's, like we get Abraham Lincoln on the back of a penny, or whatever, or we get like, an eagle or something like that. What's on the, see, do I have a penny? Let's see what's on the back of an American. We got Thomas Jefferson on a nickel, and we got Jefferson Memorial, that's no good. And we got some sort of torch on the back of a dime. And you can see that I don't really have a whole lot of money to figure out what's on the back of it. But this is the face of Valentinian, and on the back, he's like dragging somebody by the hair. This was like you're paying your taxes. It's like, and you're looking over, wow, if I don't pay my taxes, this is what's going to happen to me. I'm going to get dragged by my hair through the streets of Rome. So he took control of the throne of Rome, and you can see this little symbol there. That became the symbol of this symbol is still around with the Pope. In Rome, this symbol is still around. The cross with the P in the minute. The Pontifex Maximus. That's like, I am the high priest. And that's really what that sign means. The emperor is the high priest. And the emperor now controlled the Christian church. Okay? So we use that word loosely. Okay? Because it was universal. This is what the word Catholic means. Universal, that's what, if you're Catholic with a small c, that's what it means. Universal, centralized control. There's one authority, and everyone submits to the one authority. And the Roman emperor decided that this was going to be good. This was going to be good for my empire. This will, everyone will become Christian. So they compelled them to come in. They compelled them to come in the way that Muslims compel people to come in. They beat people into the church, really. They used that scripture, they used it, they used it out of order, and they compelled people to join the church. Even the great thinker Augustine, I don't know, maybe you've read City of God. It's an awesome kind of writing. You've read his Confessions. There's a spiritual element to those, but there's a dark side there that, he thought that it was best to force people into church so they could hear the gospel. Let's force people into church so they can hear the gospel, and then they might get saved. Better that they be forced into church than they never come into church and just go to hell anyway. That was his rationalization. And this is what happened. And really, you had strong believers scattered throughout the empire, but the persecution had scattered people far and wide, and really kept the pilgrim element, the sojourner element of the church, fresh everywhere. So when they had all this power, they didn't know how to use it. They didn't know what to do with it. It was like and some people became drunk with power. And the Roman bishop, the hierarchy started to be plugged in. Rather than a local church with a local pastor and his elders, guiding a small group of people and a larger group of people, sending people out into other parts of the empire, establishing new churches, which was the Bible apostolic method and the method that Paul taught, his people to keep moving, plant churches, appoint elders, move. Plant a church, appoint elders, move. And this element, I think, it's easy for us on this side of everything to judge and to say, why did these people get this way? I don't know. I've never had $1 million dang dollars. I don't know what that would do to me. There's many stories when you get lots of money, you just go crazy with it. And these people got lots of power. All of a sudden, rather than running for their lives or hiding underground in the catacombs, they are living in the palace. They are controlling the palace. They are telling the emperor that they want that pagan statue out of the Senate building. And they got it taken out of the Senate building. Like in the United States right now, if someone wants to take down a thing of the Ten Commandments, the court says you got to take it down. You can't even have that, So, but this is what's happening in Rome, and they have all authority. And of course, when there's like that, absolute authority corrupts absolutely. That's what happened. The kind of authority that they had, the backing of the emperor, that was like a huge thing. And it hurt the church. It hurt the church for 1,000 years, really, to be honest. It hurt the church for 1,000 years. When the Western Empire falls, we will enter the Dark Ages. And the Pope that is in power at Rome will exercise much authority throughout the continent of Europe and execute many people in the name of God, thinking he is doing God a favor. And they will institute many mystical rituals and ascetic practices and turn the church service into really a pagan ritual. Really, the Mass is like is really closely aligned to a sort of a ritual that was going on in the temples that they knew, which makes sense because when the emperor became a Christian, then lots of Romans in different, who had lived on philosophy and pagan worship, brought all of their ideas into the church, and they weren't believers really. They said, "Well, I got to be a Christian if I'm going to, have a piece of property in Rome. So I think I'll go to church." So they went to church and listened to the Mass and listened to the thing in Latin and everything, and it became a grand thing there. Okay, so I'm sorry, I digress. Political. We're still in the political, kind of thing. Okay. All right. Next. Okay. So here you see, this is the kind of thing that's surrounding the territories of Rome. You see the Ostrogoths, the Germanic people, the Saxons, the Franks. Gaul is here. This is Spain. Italy, and over here the Persian Arab area here, and this is where Constantinople is, which built the city, named the city for himself. Constantine did, and that's where it is. It remained there, and is still there as Istanbul. So you see these little places. These are legion camps. The diamonds are legion camps, and then these little borders are the kind of borders the church that was now centralized in Rome began dividing up the territory. And so you had a high bishop or a high leader in Rome, and then you had these other things. But what's going on here is this Germanic group of people are encroaching into the territory. They are coming into this southern part of Europe and all of its plenty. And they are very active and ready to attack. So the Visigoths, this group of people here, they were the first ones to sort of come close in to Italy. And as the civil war, as the Roman emperors fought for control of the whole empire, these invaders are coming in and picking off little towns. Like you see, you got these little wide spaces along the river here. Not a lot of fortification, but you had legions of Rome here, but wide spaces, and people were pouring in here and plundering cities and towns in there and taking what they wanted, find food, eat it, and then move on. That's pretty much the way they did it. In that time, they would be paid. The Roman government would pay certain groups of people, take some of them into the army and pay them, and really try and keep them from taking over the whole territory. So this is happening about 400 to 410 AD, 400 to 410. German federation states are being allowed to exist around here now also. Like they have self-rule. So independent colonies now given self-rule. And that would mean that they would raise their own armies and raise their own resources and get ready to attack and move deeper in. So while the Roman emperors fought each other, then these people started to prepare their way to get in here. One group of people, the Vandals, went all the way around here and began to make noise in this area. They did a end around. Rather than go down through Italy in this way to Sicily, they went out through Spain, across the Gibraltar Strait, and into this north part of Africa and took Carthage. That will happen within the next 50 years, from 400 to 450. Okay, let's move there. There you can see the invasions of the Roman Empire. There you see the Vandals coming down around, going into this area, Carthage, and making trouble with their boats. They controlled this whole sea also. The Vandals got control of Carthage and began to control the sea, and actually took the port of Rome also. So you see, they surrendered this to the Angles and the Jutes and the Saxons, so Britain is gone. The Franks begin to take care of this part of Normandy, and here you have the Huns, the Hun capital. The Huns are just waiting to have their day, and they'll have it in a couple of years here. So, but 410, this is a Visigoth, the Visigoth king Alaric, Alaric, Visigoth, he's a Visigoth king. He will lead his army into Rome. He will lead his army into Rome. Now, Alaric is nominally a Christian, so the amount of destruction and devastation humanly, like as far as like raping and that kind of stuff that would go on, minimal. Not a lot of death and destruction, just a ransacking of all the food stores in there. 3 days. It's 3 days. It's really the first time that Rome has been occupied in 1,000 years. It's not been occupied this way in 1,000 years, and here it has been occupied for 3 days by this barbarian. Really, a barbarian did this. And that's what they were thinking. How did this happen? So this is what it looked like on that day. This is probably the leader. You can see this is a raging kind of, woodsman kind of group of people that are coming in there. There's another look at him, Alaric descending on Rome. He's taken in burning things, but really only 3 days. Only 3 days, and he had planned to go across and invade Africa, but he didn't get there because his boats were destroyed, and eventually he died on his way back to his country, and so that his body would not be abused. So his body would not be abused. His army took him, wrapped him up in a casket, and then they shut off a river, buried him at the bottom of a river, and then they let the river flow over top of him. So they've never found this man's body. They found the Titanic, but they cannot find Alaric's body in the bottom of a river there. So anyway, but he was a mystical. It was a mystical kind of king. He said he heard, while he was walking through a sacred grove, he heard a voice say, "Attack, Alaric, attack. Go and take." So he conducted 2 invasions of Italy and 3 sieges of Rome, and this last siege was the final one that he got in there. To do what he did, and to move the emperor. To move the emperor. The emperor had already moved his residence out of Rome, and so Rome was just really left as an empty city full of slaves and small population, really, comparatively speaking. At its height, Rome was full of 1.5 million people, but right now it was empty, no food there. Okay. All right, so this is 410. Okay, after he dies, the Visigoths really couldn't press their advantage. The Vandals had taken the other territory across the Mediterranean before they could get to it. A woman of influence, her name was Placidia. She, her son was made emperor at 4 years old. So guess who was ruling? Mommy. 4 years old was the son. 4-year-old son was the made emperor, and so Placidia, she was the mother, and she ruled the Roman Empire for about 20 years, from 423, about 27 years, from 423 to 450. She really was in control of the of what was going on underneath this other Aetius. He was the next he was a Romanian, had good relationship with the Huns, who were going to become a significant player. About 425, 430 AD, the Huns are going to become a significant force and control a large part of Europe, as we'll see. This man and another man, and this is really his name, Gaiseric. He was the Vandal. This was a Vandal, those Vandal tribes that moved down. let's go back here. The Vandals, this was, he gained control here, and as a compromise, he was given full authority over all of this territory. So now the Roman Empire has been split in half, and now it also has lost its breadbasket. And, the Huns are starting to make noise in this area, and they are not getting enough gold, they are not getting enough food, and they are just itching to come and attack the territory there. This is Placidia. Nice pearls. She must have liked those Mickey Moto pearl kind of thing there. But that's her. She ruled as the mother of the emperor for those years. And then this is Aetius here. Here he is receiving, what he's doing here is he's receiving a term from the Huns. He's receiving from Attila the Hun, he's receiving terms of a treaty here. I will not attack you and destroy all your people the way I've destroyed other people if you give me so much money. And kind of interesting little puppy there, huh? There. I don't know how the dog got in there. I'm just, it seems like interesting. The little dog is there. Okay. Isn't there a dog in Gladiator? I think in that movie there's a dog in Gladiator. And we never really find out what happens to him. That's the only main character in the whole movie that you never really find out what happens to. And I've often wondered, me and my son have often wondered what happened to the dog in the Gladiator movie. We know what happens to the main character, we know what happens to his wife and son and all that, but what happened to the dog? We don't see him in the fields when, I'm sorry, I almost gave away the movie. If you haven't seen it, I don't really think you should, maybe. That's fine. Oh, you're good. Okay. Anyway, now Aetius, one of the amazing things that he did is, we'll go get you a map here. This territory up here is Poland right now. He moved an entire people group. Okay, this is Poland up in this area here, by the Vistula River up there. But he moved an entire people group called the Burgundians. The Burgundians were moved from this place all the way down here to this Savoy region of, Burgundy, Savoy region of France, what is France now. But they were living up here. And it just was like, hey, I'll do you guys a favor. We'll take all of your people and bring you right down here. You'll be right there. You can see the water from the new place I'm bringing you to. And he did it, and these people became a powerful buffer to some of these attacks that happened. And they were loyal to Aetius. They were loyal to him because of this move. If you moved on up from up here where it's nice and cold down here to the sunny side of the street, that's kind of interesting. It's beautiful down there. So anyway, so that was one of the things that he did. He was a masterful kind of politician. Now this is our friend. This is Attila the Hun. And we have several, really there's no way to disguise the way he is. I've got just so that the Hungarians won't get upset at me, I'm just going to read from this book about the way they were described. Yes, Brian?
Why did Aetius move the people from Poland to France?
It was just something that he did. He just decided that this people group, he wanted to move them. Like he had good relationships with them, and he gave them, they were in a colder part of the, I don't know the total climate there, but that's north, and he moved them down there just as a political maneuver to help his standings. He had good relations. Usually what they did, he might have been married to maybe someone in his family was married to someone who was the king, related to the king of that, and just decided it was just sort of like it was just a very political calculation to bring that group of people down, and they were probably good fighters, as most of those people were. So this were the Huns. All right, now we're talking about the Huns. This is Attila, to say it the way the Hungarians do it. We say Attila the Hun, but Attila. So there's another picture of him, and that's just they could ride. I understand they could ride. They trained their horses so well they could turn around and fire arrows. Invented many weapons of war. A kind of bow that you could shoot with both hands, kind of thing. That thing. But it says, the people of the Huns. This is Michael Grant's Fall of the Roman Empire. So, and this is what he writes: the people of the Huns exceed every degree of savagery. savagery. They have compact, strong limbs and thick necks. And they are when they're atop their horse, they are monstrously ugly and misshapen. They eat roots of wild plants and half-raw flesh of any kind of animal. And to warm it up, they set it under their saddle and let the heat of the horse warm up the meat for them a little bit. Yeah, that's, they sit on their meat and then they eat it. That's kind of interesting. So they are almost glued to their horses, which are hardy. It is true, but ugly. Sometimes they sit on them woman fashion. And, okay, well, anyway, take care of that. You get the picture. That's the way they are. Rather than stop riding, they would just sort of do their business while they were riding, which is kind of interesting. So that's, that's their, I'm just trying to create, history's not pretty, people. Okay, it's not pretty. There's a lot of ugliness in history, so you just got to get beyond it and just listen to it. Okay, sorry. Okay, there you see a better picture of him. And, I don't know who he's talking to there, but he's ready for war. So this is his empire, which you can see here. This is amazing. I guess if you saw, large, ugly people who sat on meat, you would get out of the way and let them conquer your land, which they did. But you could see, look at the expansive territory that he took over in this. Now remember, he only ruled for 19 years. This is Alexander the Great status in what he did. He rules from the Rhine, Danube, all the way over to the Caspian Sea, and rules all this group of people, collecting the basest and the strongest of them and forming an army for himself. So he was just, they were just, ruthless invaders. Ruthless invaders. They were great warriors. They controlled this whole large part of here. Now it says about Attila himself here, he was of medium height. He had apparently become lame from falling off a horse. Oh no, wrong person. Wrong guy. Sorry, that was Gasseric. He was swarthy complexion, small, deep-seated eyes, a flat nose, broad shoulders, short, square body of nervous strength, and he had a consciousness. His walk expressed a consciousness of his superiority above the rest of mankind. This is a Gothic historian, Jordanus, who writes this. His walk expressed a consciousness of superiority over the rest of mankind. He had the custom of fiercely rolling his eyes if he wished to enjoy the terror which he inspired. So he and Aetius had a good arrangement together. They were, Aetius was allowed to keep his reign, and Attila was allowed to keep his reign. But he did when he wasn't happy, he would make these little forays into different places. And you can see he sacked certain cities, he threatened certain cities, and he made several moves into the territory that belonged still to Aetius and the Romans. Eventually he was defeated. Aetius did drive him back, and he suffered one defeat. Attila suffered one defeat. And then he got married, and on his wedding night he blew a blood vessel and he was gone. That was pretty much. After his wedding feast, he went to bed. They woke up the next morning, he was dead. And so ended the story of Attila the Hun. No, I don't think his wife killed him. It just says that it's just explained that it was a blood vessel. That's another one. There you see him sitting on his throne, ready. People begging for mercy in front of him. That's a stern-looking kind of guy. Now here's something that's interesting. He really got to the point where he wanted to take over Rome. He got to the point of just ready to cross the river and march on Rome. But the Pope, this is the Pope at the time, Pope Leo, Pope Leo comes over here and he stops him. Somehow Attila recognized the Pope's authority, or seemingly authority, and decided not to march on Rome. And this is a painting that's in the Vatican, representing one of the great exploits of the popes. Went there and stopped Attila the Hun from coming in and taking over Rome. So that was, so Pope Leo met him and he returned, and but that's, but that's an interesting kind of, okay. Now this is 453 when Attila does that. 453, when Attila the Hun dies. And, but Rome has been really stripped of all of the pretense of power. People are no longer afraid of Rome at all. They're no longer afraid of Rome at all. Eventually, a man by the name of Romulus Augustus, he will come to power around 470s. And what will happen here, this next picture here, this is really the end of the Western Roman Empire as we know it. This is Romulus giving his throne, giving his crown to this. This is Osa Adar, who is from the Germanic tribes. So the army was now full of, it's spelled like this, Oda Acer. He was, the most of the army was now full of Germans from the Danube region, and so they decided we're going to have one of our own as the emperor. So the army effectively selected Oda Acer to be the emperor of the western part of the Roman Empire, and Romulus could do nothing about it but offer up his crown. And so now the German tribes control all of that western part of the empire. And so that's what happened. What caused this? What caused this kind of collapse and everything, and this internal collapse of what was seemingly like an amazing dynasty of power? We'll talk about it in 10 minutes. Okay? So take a break. It's 7 minutes after 7. We'll start in about 10 minutes. Okay? All right? Get a tea. Refresh yourself, all that. Think about Attila the Hun. I'll just put a picture up then so you can be terrified. There you go.